How's it going, guys? It's the Cranky Viking here. I'm going to be going into how to clear stage 15 of the Technique dungeon using the two new units we got, Licht and Raya. So just for starters, I'm going to go into here, kind of show you the team that I've been using. It's just a mono green team, as you should use for each one of the dungeons. Obviously, for the power dungeon, you use mono blue team, which I have here, and then a mono red team, which I haven't really played with a lot, obviously, since I still have Mimosa in here, and then a mono green team for the Technique dungeon. So one thing to keep in note, obviously it says my team power is insufficient to the actual power of the dungeon. Realistically, that doesn't impact whether or not you can actually complete the dungeon, but it more impacts whether or not you can do a dispatch on the actual dungeon. So if I were to go into here and look over all of my Licht Raya, Radies, and Mimosa's gear sets, it's nothing crazy. I mean, I got really lucky with my LR rolls, but I end up having to transfer it back and forth between. This one goes in between Licht and Charmy whenever I'm using Charmy. This one goes in between any of my physical attackers, which honestly, it's probably one of the sets I'm the most proud of. Same kind of goes with Mimosa. It's another magic attack team that I kind of threw it together, and Radies also uses magic attack, so he ended up getting a bit of the short stick to some extent. I think he's still built out pretty well. But if we were to go in here, I always do ×3. If you haven't gone into the shop and bought the lobster pack, I would definitely recommend it. 30% on gear drop is insane, but if I were to go into my preset skills, I have this might not be optimal. I mean, I'm more than welcome to feedback, but I end up having Licht and Raya using first skill 2 and then special skill as a secondary. The AoE is just helpful. Honestly, you could probably switch it around to where it's 2 and 1 or 1 and 2, whichever direction. I think getting some attacks in before doing the AoE is helpful, but I mean, we could at some point try it differently, but for the time being, I've had success with this setup. You also want to make sure that your Raya is using the combined ability, because if not, this is only a single target, whereas this is a AoE. You want to make sure that you're doing damage to all the units at once. From there, a Radi's priority is making sure that you actually have a barrier on all of your team. Having that shield on everybody just increases longevity and makes sure that you can go through the raid without an issue. From there, Mimosa, obviously you want to have her focus on healing. You don't want her to use her link attack at all, and just to delay when the ult ends up going off, because the earlier the ult, the less useful it is going to be for you. You want to make sure that she's focusing on using her skill 2 after using skill 1 on first turn, and then having the tertiary be the res. So this is what I end up having for the preset. If we were to go just auto this and go through it, I'm going to let it run. You're going to end up seeing Radis ends up going immediately, ends up throwing around a 30k barrier, and we have 2 decently sized hits. Raya didn't hit nearly as hard. But you end up getting an AoE off pretty early, does a bit of damage. Raya's AoE does a bit of damage, takes out one, and everybody ends up either getting AoE'd or they end up focusing Radis. Radis does have the potential to get a poison off, which is also very helpful. But you see here one of the main issues that Mimosa ends up using her ult fairly early. The benefit is this isn't a team that's going to go through and bust through every single part of the raid and it's going to be super quick. This team, more than anything, is focused on longevity and making sure you can get it through. So if you are like me, where you kind of just, if you have extra stamina, leave a bunch of raids or dungeon crawls going through while you're falling asleep. You leave it either on your computer on an emulator or on your phone while you're trying to go to sleep. This will get the job done. I've done maybe 20 or 30 raid attempts with this team. It might be less, but I've done a fair amount of raid attempts with this team. I ended up getting the 5-ticket guaranteed LR using this team today, and honestly, I can walk away from this and there's no issues. You see, my team has full health. Mimosa is nowhere near dying. Radis is tanking pretty well, even though he's built magic attack. And he's going to always be focused on heals because he's the one that's mainly getting attacked. Raya's one ends up doing AoE damage as well. Even with the taunt, I mean, you have Mimosa who's about to use her ult next turn after doing a pretty good heal. And we already took out one of the last mobs in the dungeon. and bam, she uses her ult. Realistically, I end up leaving this stage always full health with all of my team members. Obviously, I have a max dupe Licht, max dupe Raya, and 2 dupes on both my Radis and my Mimosa, so I do benefit from their additional passive, but realistically, just the major gap that I have with this team's health, even now, I mean, we're towards the end of it, they end up with a massive barrier. I realistically think you can end up running this team maybe with some replacements, which I can go into very quickly after the gear selection. Do we get an LR? No LR, but we end up getting one of the SSR pieces that is pretty good. I definitely do like the Noble Inheritance, especially if you're building a crit build. I ended up getting 2 of the special sets, max HP plus 7% and 10% HP, as HP recovery is pretty huge. But if we go into the teams, the replacements that you could use for the team, it's kind of the same as my raid video. I mean, realistically, if you really need an attacker, you can throw Yuno in, or you can throw Frigolion in. I would try to stay away from using Rill. Maybe use Rill if you only have Licht or only have Raya. Throw in Rill as a debuffer. I mean, his debuffs are pretty good. You end up getting a buff for magic attack. I think this is just to himself, though. You end up getting reduced defense and buff removal on the enemy, which honestly is pretty good as well. You end up getting incapacitate level 3 and a stun with his ult. So overall, he's not terrible, especially if you only have one attacker to kind of go with. Outside of that, I mean, you could go with Valtos. Valtos overall is really good. He increases mobility, increases magic attack, increases mobility with his ult, increases crit rate and mobility, which is huge, especially if you do end up having Raya or Licht and want to build them crit. Vanessa, also another option. She ends up giving a barrier of protection as well, and total defense. Ends up increasing accuracy with her first attack. Alcadora, or Alec Dora, however you say, Adam Sandler, as Gotcha Death ends up calling him. He's okay. I honestly wouldn't try to build him whatsoever. If you're in dire straits, maybe. But that would end up being your team. Another defender you can use is Klaus. Again, I wouldn't recommend it. If you have Radies, definitely try to build Radies up and focus on your main teams. Main 2 teams realistically should be Mono Blue, Mono Green. I ended up getting Austin Max dupes, so I ended up building him for my Mono Red, as well as Charlotte. And I really like Yami, so I ended up building him up a bit. But I honestly think that should be your team for consistently clearing the green dungeon. If you do have any questions or any opinions or have any input, feel free to leave me a comment below. A like and a sub would always be appreciated. But this has been the Cranky Viking. You have a great rest of your day.